Excellent. So here's our team report. We looked at it yesterday. So we know we have the behavior style of each of us and our strongest factor. So that's just more for a review.
And what you can do in the system, it's an option, but you can, so you can highlight in the system, choose who the leader is, so their name comes out in green. We didn't do it in here, but of course, we would do Leon, for today, right?
You'll see that when you, here we go. And now a reminder here, we've got 5 of us that are more relational, 4 that are more results. Out of the 9 members, we roll up as an engager team. Keith, you're probably not too surprised about that.
From my nightmares last night.
A lot of engagement going on. In fact, I think at the end of the day, our engagers needed that release. They didn't get enough of that conversation. So. No, because we're learning. But it does point to you need a little bit of that release to be able to communicate, where the rest of us are a little bit more right on the line of introversion. So
we are making you present later. You just don't know what you're presenting.
Don't need to know.
Yeah, you don't need to know.
So here's our team roll-up on our factors. Quite interesting that we roll up as a team as fast-paced. So I know this sometimes may not move as fast as we probably need to, but it's for learning, because some people on the team probably do need a little bit of more guidance. And then we're an outgoing. So yesterday we sat in the class all day and we're fairly quiet, would ask questions. Monique was able to actually get a lot of questions and sort of satisfy that outgoing factor. But it really does point to that if we were working together over time, we would see these factors come out. It's quite interesting, and I've never seen a team report that sort of frames it this way. But here's our blind spots. Impatient. We could potentially have sort of an overspending sort of attitude. It's quite interesting if we were
my
actually
credit
working.
was blowing last night with your spending on dinner. What brand of wine was that?
We would have, if we had stayed together a little longer, yeah, that would have definitely come out.
But when you see those two, one thing that I do is when you see those two factors sitting there together and then look at the context of the team, what type of team would you think that we could be? Because we're all great people now harmoniously working together because we've built trust and can, have creative conflict. But what kind of team do you think we could be if we all work together? Seeing all that.
Maybe a fundraising arm for some kind of charity.
Yeah, the outside fundraising arm. Yeah.
So I see generous throws off high returns. That one's the one that went to your, who said that? That's what made me think. Is that where you went with? Where do you pick that out from? Because I would pick that out from that financial attitude.
I actually picked it out from fast-paced and outgoing. So if you're going to be a fast-paced, outgoing team that's, looking for communication but also results-driven and want to make decisions and move quickly, what is it that you're trying to do? So you're trying to connect with people, but you also want to get stuff done quickly. So what kind of organization needs that? And that sort of that
or event planning,
planning.
Or community building kind of work.
Yeah, or even
Public relations.
Yeah, or even outside sales. You're gonna that's going to be the traits of that as well. Now there could be other factors for outside sales, like if you had pioneering and outgoing, that would be outside sales. But you're sort of seeing it's a very outward focused relationship building, connecting with people. Connecting with a lot of people. The fast-paced people tend to connect with a lot of people, not a few people, whereas if that was outgoing and patient, then you would be having more long-term relationship building going on there, building sustainable relationships. But I think you're all on the right area. The real point is I just wanted you to look at that and say, well, when we see the blend of our team, what's the direction it could go and we would all be comfortable? And I think it's this table here that really brings out the picture of the team. Now, it may not be what you're doing, which is another issue that needs to, it needs to be solved by adding somebody in or taking someone out. But I think it gives you a picture of what everybody in here could do together behaviourally.
Any questions on this chart? It's a very important chart.
No, but just to say the opposite of that, right, would probably be pretty miserable at something that was very repetitive and solitary. So if we had some sort of, if we were all librarians,
I
if we
wouldn't be. No,
you wouldn't be,
no,
but we as a team would
solitary
be.
would be all right, but repetitive, no.
Right?
Yeah.
So if we were, a team that was gonna file documents all day, and that was our big mission, was
Or
that each of us
research.
was gonna do research and filing, we probably wouldn't last very long as a team.
No.
Right? Looking at this, you could say, okay, so if we were talking to a research team that had to do a lot of, solitary research work, and this was their team report, how successful do you think that team would be? They might be able to do it because of learned behavior and stretching, but people would be drained all the time leaving this job. If this was our team and we were tasked to do repetitive, especially slow, repetitive things without much connection to each other or to the community, we probably wouldn't be super thrilled about that as a group.
So here's the workplace insights. And for teams that roll up, when you actually see a team roll up as an adapter team, they really have sort of the balance in sort of the success to be that high performing team. We would have some challenges because we're an engager team, unless the mission was really sort of suited for that, because it really will be that outgoing. You'll see that fast-paced and outgoing sort of nature of the team. But this workplace insights, if it comes out as mediums, you have sort of a balance, but we would want to sort of just pay attention to the highs and the low. We would not really have an empathetically listening group. No, I'm not surprised at all. Fast-paced, think about it, empathetically listening. So we probably would be getting through things pretty fast, but there wouldn't be a lot of love given around there. Maybe a couple of us. And then we would be pretty clear, actually in direct and candidly, but there may be some folks on the team that need a little bit more of that empathy.
The people who are engagers, of course, which we've got quite a lot on our team, aren't necessarily the best listeners, because they're busy thinking about what they're going to say next. Now, the people who are the better listeners are actually cooperative and patient. They're going to tend to be the better listeners. And of course, the empathetically listen part is about demonstrating that you have listened. It's not just whether you did or not. If you're going too fast, you can't demonstrate it.
A lot of people in the room are engagers. Is that a normal type to do this?
Not usually.
Really?
Not that it isn't, but this is probably, we're definitely more weighted towards the engagers, and that was just by chance, right? But we usually have a distribution of initiators, strategists, and sometimes community builders. So this is sort of unusual.
This is just the way it fell out today. You get every mix coming in.
Yeah, sort of a fun. Bridget actually, when she organizes our events, she would a couple of times we had more of a weighted reflective thinker. She knows she needs to get her early to set up because they'll show up early. Engagers and influencers, like typically it might not be, unless they have a plan, they might show up just in time.
The hardest session I ever did was one of the early ones that I did, but it was for a leadership team of a big consulting firm, and 21 out of the 25 people were initiators and strategists. And then the other 4, there was like a reflective thinker, an engager, an adapter, and an influencer. But it had 21 out of the 25. And that's also when I realised, again, that was like one way I'm that type of person, so I could deal with it, but it was hard work because you're getting challenged the whole time. They're tough. The business problems they have, when you've got a company that's like that, the business problems they had were huge.
I don't feel like a room full of initiators would actually go that well in the long run.
No. And it didn't for that organisation. Certainly not for anyone working for them. And when I mentioned afterwards, well, guys, if you're really going to grow as a business and retain your customers or clients and your people, you need a chief of people culture, not just HR, because HR to me is much more of a mechanical function. You know, doing numbers, you know, filling out forms. You need a people culture leader that reports to the CEO and is a respected position in the C-suite of the business. And until you have that, none of this is going to change. But of course, are you going to get that response out? Are you going to get the right response out of an initiator? No. Less likely to.
Quick question.
Particularly when it costs money.
And you may have already answered this. So how many people would it take for this to be impactful? Let's say if I wanted to take a store manager and assistant manager, would that be a benefit with just two people?
You can run a comparison report, which Nikki's going to cover.
Okay.
It's a really pretty deep sort of comparison report of both people.
Okay.
It's really used. You may remember from yesterday. It's sort of one of the tools you can use to really get through some creative sort of conflict if it's going on. But it's always good just proactively when you have a new hire to match that comparison report with the second or the manager. The team report, you can run 3 or more. It loses its effectiveness. It can really be run up to 50 people, but it's a blend. It's hard to manage. I think it's optimal when it's maybe 12 or less, because you really see a lot of information, a lot of trends. And if you think about it, the span of control of a leader is usually no more than 8 people. You know, you usually see that leader doesn't have that many direct reports. If they do, there's probably an issue there. But so that span of control, that's how you'd want to run this team report.
Awesome. Thank you.
So here's, this probably looks familiar, the factors and where we as a team fall. I'd say on the commanding side, that's pretty balanced. As long as we have, again, sort of trust, we've been able to sort of work through those things, but you will see Caitlin and Tyler a little more on that cooperative side. So I know on your team at PG Wireless, you probably have a lot of this going on, a lot of take charge. So just recognize you're over on this side. So it doesn't mean that you can't be sort of a leader in the group, but you know, it's around sort of knowing the shared goals that you guys can attain that. And then the rest of us sort of are in the middle. People, we definitely, that's not too surprising for an engager team to be over here on the expressive, outgoing side.
Thanks for putting up with me.
And Hughes, fortunately, he got a little bit of a break yesterday from us. But you can see that, you know, he's going to be best at sort of really in that more reserved and being part of the team. But if Hughes sort of says, hey, I need a little bit of a break, you know, we can recognize that he doesn't need all of this outgoing. But you guys do. That's why you went out later. You needed that. And Paul sort of did his thing, but he's definitely outgoing. You see that. And I'm right in the middle. Okay, here we go. This is where that empathetically listening thing, we don't have anybody on our team that's really, and maybe it's not needed necessarily, but recognize, you know, there's a few people that are really fast-paced. You got Hugh, Paul, and Keith, very fast-paced. Rest of us in the middle. Any thoughts on that one? So for Tyler,
So on the patients, you get the mid-range people whose scores are in that 40 zone. So that means that they probably are easily moved to the patient side, correct?
they can, but I would say that they're not going to demonstrate, you know, real high patience, especially if it's a fast-paced environment. They'll sort of go with the group.
They will do it easier than I would.
Yeah, that's
So
true.
when it's needed, they'll do it. And in a way, I believe for facilitating people, you know, that and even to some degree being a leader, it's not, you know, if you're in that 40 to 55 range, that's good because you can listen. I mean, one of the key things for leadership is being able to listen and demonstrate to the teams that you can listen. But at the same time, you've got to be sort of tough enough to hold people to account, deal with change, rejections, issues and whatnot. So if you're too patient, that starts getting uncomfortable in its own right. So I think this is a good one to be in the, to be more in the middle of, because you can be relational when needed, which is I think what you're alluding to, but hard-edged. Yep. So you, Keith, at 40, can adapt enough at 40, without it completely feeling wrong, to listen and relate.
Paul, any thoughts on yours? Do you see that? Because you manage a lot of people. So we'd have to flex that.
But this is also where the emotional intelligence comes in. The more that you are aware of this and where you are, then the better you can deal with it, right? To make it work.
Okay. Structure, we're sort of a little bit weighted on the spontaneous side. We got Paul and Keith over there on very planned. You guys definitely have the planning down. Hugh, Michelle, and Tyler, sort of right in the middle. Monique's 34, Nikki, Leon, Caitlin. Don't put us in charge of the plan. Make sure we've got somebody over there that's.
I'll make sure you stay to the plan.
Yes, good point. Yes, that's right, very much. So if literally the four of us were doing the presentation for that nonprofit, we probably have to have a good outline, but we would deviate probably from it a bit. Trust, we've talked a lot about that. It's fairly balanced here. See, this is probably good, but you do have a little more on the trusting side. Tyler at 64, we've talked about that. Monique, I think we had a little discussion on that as well. And then you got the skeptical questioning. Don't be surprised if Hugh, Paul, and Keith ask questions. They want to know. This is important for them to learn. Then Nikki and I are right in the middle. Surprised? And then
I think
Paul-
you'll see.
Paul,
where,
you're-
I think you can see why. You can see it that being curious. So that's where the questioning is coming from for Monique. She will want to know, answers and is exploring. It's for her, that drive is coming down there and creative.
and her need for being outgoing.
And Caitlin, if you've noticed, has asked quite a lot of questions as well, and that's out of curiosity.
Pioneering, we're pretty weighted in the middle. Probably a good thing. You got Hugh, creative ideas, breaking through walls. Caitlin, more on the content side. But you're working for a CEO that's pretty certain over here. Probably good balance. Do you see that in you?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I think that's one of the. Do I need a mic?
Oh, yeah. Monique's got it.
I think that's one of the biggest differences between us. And we have our own team assessment, just the two of us. But I don't think I've ever seen it. And that would be really interesting to look at.
I mean, you could run a comparison report over you and Josh.
Yeah.
And we should make sure that the profile's in the right slots
Yeah.
in the system for you to do that. We can, when we get to demonstrating the system, maybe Bridget can do it. As a way to.
Yes, that would be just fantastic. Because that is one of the biggest ways that I think we're very different. And I think it's one of the more obvious ways that we're different.
Yeah, you have to leverage that a bit because he's going to be so pioneering. I know that he is. I've spent time with him.
And fast-paced. That's
Fast-paced.
that's the
But
one.
you're fast-paced, so that's good.
Yeah.
But I think that you probably can feel that. Risk. Got a couple of us in the high category, the mid-range. And then Tyler and Keith over on the cautious side. Do you see that, Tyler and Keith? Just evaluating, probably for a strategist, knowing your risks.
Making sure I don't get in trouble.
Yeah, yeah.
Well,
I'm sure
it
that's
just,
manifest.
I mean, the strength of that is just becomes more calculated decision making. Doesn't mean you won't take a risk. You just be far more calculated about which risks you're going to take.
And then creative, we are definitely sort of weighted, sort of balanced here.
Should we be concerned that our risk takers are the two of you?
I'm not quite that high, but it is one of mine.
You were sitting there like, whoa, 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 I'm right.
We have a couple team members that are over. We have a couple team members that are over on our own team, a little more on the middle range, but
We have very strong risk management policies.
we do. Any questions on this? So you can see how you can, when you're running a team report, really see the personality of the team, and you can have some great results. And make it sort of interesting and collaborative when you're doing the readout, because you've probably touched base with each person on the team, so nobody's surprised that, that if I saw my content here, what does that mean? See it as an opportunity, a positive. But you will feel, I'm sure, the effect of that when you're working with a pioneer, somebody that's extreme. Got to find the benefit to that. All right. I'm not going to go through all of the sub-factors, but there's a lot of great information in this team report. So overall business risks and successes for our team. We did see this in sort of that workplace insights. Communicates pretty effectively, manages creative conflict. We do have this being too self-interested, and may misinterpret others' problems because we don't have that other side of empathetically listening. So those are some things that we would just want to pay attention to. May not listen or attention to detail because we're all sort of at that more fast-paced, moving things along. Any surprises there?
You need to add may ask questions as being a problem.
That's the creative piece. And then if you're doing a deeper dive, the sub-factors are all listed here for us, our average of our team, and then it shows each person's whether they are cooperative or take charge. And if you see the key here is a left is going to be more of that cooperative side, the right would be more of a take charge. So you can really see, or if it's a middle score. So you can get a quick review of each of the sub-factors if you wanted to really do a deeper dive here. So, and it's each one of the factors are listed here.
Need a mic?
Question,
Yep.
Yeah.
Monique?
At the beginning, stop that. At the beginning, you had said that there were 3 factors for problem people. I think you said that you would find
For
you know,
rogues?
For rogues. Are there any here? What are those factors? Is it me?
You're really worried that you're a rogue. So the 3 factors are a person who's competitive, so the competitive sub-factor, creative, and reserved are more likely to be the rogue. So the competitive is the drive to get results, if not managed properly, cut corners. Creative, they're going to invent the off-the-map way to move money somewhere or whatever it is as being naughty. And then the reserved is they're very secretive. You're not going to know it's coming. So when
They have all 3 of those traits?
yeah.
All
Yeah.
three at once.
Yeah, all
in
3 at
one-
once. So if you did an organisational review and you ran those, you did then filtered the system. So we actually can download all of these scores into Excel. And so we've built a whole lot of analytical tools that are in Excel, and we're learning how we're going to put them into the system from a software programming point of view so you can get them at the drop of a hat, but you can take the scores, download them effectively to the Excel, and then it calculates it out, and you would see across every employee in the business, spot which one has those traits, and then the idea would then be to look at, okay, how are they being managed or not managed? Because often that person will get away with it because they're not properly accountable. You know, there's the wrong accountability structure inside the business, or there's a line of people and behaviours that allow it to be systemic and happen. If that makes sense, and the way that we've been sort of looking at that and handling that is much more from a people culture perspective. Is not to say, well, just because someone's got the initiator, and we're talking about the initiator profile generally speaking, just because they've got those 3 traits doesn't mean that they're a criminal, right? But and they shouldn't be treated like one. But it then raises the questions of, okay, what are the internal controls in the business? How are they being managed? How's everybody being coached? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's possible anybody with the wrong motivation could go and do something, but they're the ones who are more likely to do it, and for you not to find out about it until it's after the event.
Okay, great question. And then there's some great charts here that show, and we find that a lot of teams like to have this particular appendix that they can print out, which shows you the top 2 behavioral factors, the strengths for motivation, and then the struggles for each person. It's a great chart. And there's a couple of views of this that you can see in these appendix. And we find companies print them out and have them just available on the desk. You can print those out, laminate them. And then there's a section D around the factors and risks, and recognize that this just means, the people that are going to be sort of on those success factors here, desire to make decisions, more of those take charge. You see on the left, more of the cooperative.
This is all information you've seen along the way. Yeah. It's just consolidating
It's just consolidated a little differently, but it all sort of is wrapped around the factors.
And if you're doing a team event and this is too much information, then you can hide it.
Yeah.
You don't need, just because it's in the team report doesn't mean you need to show it.
In fact, we have a version of a summary report, team report. When you generate a team report, it'll create both versions of it. We find most teams, especially in the beginning, run that short summary version, but you can go back later and pull that longer version. Okay, so we're going to move into, this is going to be pretty fast, just because we've covered a lot of that in the dialogue. Building the team relationships. This is one of my favorites. You probably would know, just looking at that, who might actually say turn up the thermostat. Somebody that's not going to exude some of that feeling. It's pretty funny. Platinum relationship, and I've had people say, I don't really want to change my style to match someone. I don't say you ever sort of can change, but what you can do is you can be sensitive to who you're working with, because if you're going to have a team performing, you got to sort of know who you're working with, because we all need some different things. Tyler, you mentioned that yesterday, that when you're working with your managers, you sort of have to tailor it a little bit to make sure that you get the best results. Be aware of those strengths and struggles. I can't stress enough on the transparency builds trust. It really does. People can operate when they feel that there's a sense of trust. The cooperative folks, the people that are more patient, when they're in, because you need drivers in the business to actually move things. Really working that, knowing me, knowing you. It's sort of the tagline that we had a number of years ago, but that's really well known. People before numbers. You can really build a lot of trust. So I'm just going to, when you're working with your clients, build those trustful relationships. Use those comparison reports even for yourself and your client. You know, if you know the way they like to be communicated with, that's important. You know, how do they set goals? A little more passive or a little bit more active? And then the decision-making style. That's important to know. When we talk a lot about that with reflective thinkers, don't put them on the spot. Give them a little time to prepare for that answer. You get the best results when you do that. And then the accountability. If you're working with your clients, because we talked about that yesterday, Keith and Monique, you both have very different styles in how you would do the work, but you know, really set that up in that accountability process. Don't let the client sort of, you know, and the boundaries, set the boundaries. It's very important. Any questions on this slide? Talked about the environment keys. This is just a reminder. Very important.
That's the poster too that we have.
Yes, we do. In our office, we have a poster that's, I think it's 2 by 3. It's very large. Sits in front of our desk or on the side of it. And when we do events with clients, we really have those posters as part of the engagement. And when you're doing a team event, each person will get up and talk about sort of the things that they really are important for them. And it gets the team to understand that person a little bit deeper. It's great. They may have been working together for 10 years, but there's always something in there that's important for them to know. And if you want the template of how to run that, we can provide that. This is a comparison report we haven't talked a lot about today. And Nikki's going to do a little bit more in-depth review of it, but this gives you sort of the high level, the major factors with 2 people, because the comparison report is run with 2 people. You can see here, Chris Coddington's our case study, and John's a stylish thinker, and you can really see where there's some differences. And you would key in on the big differences, but sometimes the similarities are worthy of discussion as well. You know, Chris is definitely take charge. Chris is more, you know, cooperative at 41. Reserved, this is Chris. John's a little outgoing. And then you got the questioning, skeptical, with somebody that's, you know, just above 50, 56 on trusting. But over here on the pioneering, this is breaking through barriers, new ideas. And then you got somebody that's not completely content, but just on the line. Risk-taking, this is a big difference here. Cautious. There could be some issues there. May not be, maybe they've learned how to sort of work together, but you would see, this might be sort of where you are, Caitlin, with your leader. And not real creative here, at 49 and 43. Anything jump out for anybody? Make sense? This is just a different view of it. And then you can, in this comparison report, it gives you, at the very last page, it gives you some great information all through the report, but this particular chart shows you the sub-factor relationships between both people. So if you're on this page, if you want a little bit of a deeper dive, I need to see what the spread difference is there between the cooperative and the take charge. You can go down and see the sub-factor details, because that might actually provide a little more insight. Make sense? Then as part of this comparison report, it shows you the work-life attitudes of both people side by side. I'd focus in on the blind spots for both people, the communication key, but there's other information that you may find helpful in the coaching. But you've got Chris here, too focused, fearful, which means sort of he's going to be focused on the goal. You know, would be skeptical, so if he's not feeling like there's enough information, you know, he might get fearful that he can't make the goal. You got the blind spots here for John, because he is cautious. He might miss opportunities because he's so cautious. And then as cooperative, too hesitant to actually execute. Between the two of them, they could actually be a really good partner team, but they may actually have some things that they'd really need to work on. helpful. It's prescriptive. And then the workplace insights. Oh, Monique, go ahead.
Well, no, and just
Go back.
thinking, because I'm come from having a mind shift from the work in the strengths, where you're dealing with the needs, the values, contributions of each of people's strengths. So I'm looking at really a lot of meat in that values and the workplace motivation. I'm trying to extract from yours where you have what they contribute, what their needs are, what they value, so that to frame conversations around all of that. So this seems like one of the meatiest pieces.
Yeah, I think it's got a lot of meat here that you can really probe and actually coach just to understand these motivations.
And I would say the other one is in the hiring report. If you actually pull that hiring report up for the person, even though it says hiring report, a lot of those insights are there. You know, like what do they value in the workplace, the type of
Rewards.
role they want. So I think that's where we sort of landed the plane on that. I have given Ryan a list of values for each person, for each style, and that's going to get embedded in the reports in another round of development. So some of it is, you know, we started off with a version with what we knew at the time or what we figured was important at the time, and some of it's come later, and I think we're going to go through an exercise of where we consolidate all those insights into one report, and perhaps it will be the coaching report or the workplace operations report for Business DNA, where at some point, you know, some more of these insights will be there. But it's just, you know, it's just a developmental exercise. So some of that's sitting in the hiring report right now, and then I have gone through and you know, come out with what the values are, and we will slot that into one of these reports so that you have access to it.
So this, does this work-life attitude in this particular report exist also in written paragraphs? Because people process information different ways. Some can't work off of the visual here. They might want to read it
So if you go to
transcribed in a...
so the coaching report has a lot of it like that, in that kind of more of that language. Maybe not quite as you know, lined up with exactly the same headings, but the points are out there in the sentences.
Right.
And you'll remember this table from yesterday in the workplace operations report. It just shows it side by side for the workplace insights for both Chris and John. So it gives you a good view with both individuals. And just talking about sustainability, you know, if you're working with your this team, you know, really understanding those team dysfunctions and trust. You know, you're probably helping them on the business planning. As Hugh started off yesterday, 87% of business issues are usually communication related. It usually rarely has anything to do with the technology. It's about how people communicate. And you can see where if you've got a team of, at the top, you know, the initiators and influencers, engagers, working with sort of the relationship builders and reflective thinkers, there's potential for communication problems. And they can still be at any one of the quadrants, but you can recognize, you can really almost build a whole communications exercise around how the team communicates using the information. Effective meetings, getting through things so there's actually a point to the meetings. Creating conflict resolution so people understand there is a process you can use so people really do feel like they're heard and that everybody sort of feels valued. I guess we have this on there twice, but communication training, probably just to reinforce it. It's important.